welcome joining us on the show, someone we have been hoping to get for a while. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Vani Kola, founder and managing director of Kalaari Capital, one of India's leading early stage venture capital firms. Thanks so much, ma'am, for taking our time to speak to us today. Great to have you on the show. Up first, ma'am, the headlines this year, 2016, for startups has been very different from the ones that we saw all of last year, away from, the big valuations, away from the funding. What do you believe 2016, we're halfway through it, but what do you believe the year and the couple of months ahead have in store?
I think it's a question of rosy for whom and not rosy for others, right, Natasha? I think what in every capital markets is cyclical by nature. That's a given. It's inalterable. What we don't know is the predictiveness of when that cyclicity happens and what that means to different constituents. I think for very early stage companies, there is tremendous amount of enthusiasm to support and fund them. Growth stage companies, I think, are under a bit of a constraint in finding that large capital that they might need. So I would say that if you are a seed or a Series A company, I think the market is even more enthusiastic than it has been in the last couple of years. For larger companies, yes, not quite so much.
Right, ma'am. Very often, like I said, the headlines, the glitzy headlines, the talk is all around who got how much money, how did you raise these funds. Lots of entrepreneurs also say that the challenge of raising money, perhaps, one of the biggest hurdles that they face. But for you, what do you believe is, are some of the key things that startups should focus on beyond just the money, beyond just raising those finances?
Well, first and foremost, what is the benefit and value to its customer, and how has that altered their life? Has there been any fundamental difference? And only then any business is sustainable. Doesn't matter what sector it is. There are core business tenets which has to do from, very simple things. Do your customers find value in what you're doing? Can you make money doing that? And how and when how long can you really sustain that? And I think a lot of focus, emphasis for these young companies on that would do them more good than making, cultish heroes out of nothing more than raising money.
Right, ma'am. And your portfolio, of course, really very impressive, from Snapdeal, Myntra, Zivame. And for all those who sort of want to know, how do you know, is there a gut feeling? How do you know where you want to put in your money? How do you identify a winner?
A winner, to me, I think has 3 or 4 characteristics. First is you're not willing to fail and you're not willing to quit. Somebody who's very persuasive, somebody who has that grit. It's a long road and it's not a easy, rosy road as we already discussed. So someone who has that incredible passion and faith in the value that they're creating, that keeps them going regardless of naysayers or the cheerleading applause they get. Either of those, they need to be able to be even keeled about how they work through that, driven by their core conviction. So I really look for people with that core conviction. That matters to me a lot. Secondly, their understanding at a nuanced level about a market. Usually people get the big stuff, that is 100,000 foot stuff, problems easily. That's fine. But how do you really break that down into something that is truly differentiated? Do you have any keen insights that connect the dots in ways that others haven't connected? So I look for that some element, and usually that element is not sort of a deep, it's something usually very simple that seems to miss other people. Could be, I'm putting a camera in a phone, and I'm saying that just to kind of take innovations that are fairly simple that have changed our life, and you have to be able to connect those unlikely dots. So I look for entrepreneurs who have ability to do that, and part of that ability also means that they have ability to pivot, and continue to evolve their own thinking and innovation. And then, they need to really be team players, team leaders. They need to be genuine leaders. This path is full of bumpy roads, and they need people to follow them, and they have to have the ability to hire great people who are enthusiastic to come work for them. So this is not necessarily a job for a loner. Those are some of the characteristics, apart from, of course, the market opportunity, the valuation, and all of that we look for. but a big part of the emphasis for me is people, and in the people, the final thing also that matters to me is whether I'm able to effectively work with the founder or not, and whether we share the same wavelength, same energy. Again, because we typically stay engaged with entrepreneurs in their companies for 5, 7, even 10 years now with some of the companies I've been involved. It has to be something that both enjoy working together on. And so I actually encourage entrepreneurs also, when they're looking for investors, to think a little more deeply than they do today on, is this a person I would enjoy having on my board, working with, respect and value their advice and guidance, and see myself building a deep relationship over the next few years.
22 years in the US, and then you decided to return to India, and I'm told just 60 days it was done. You'd made up your mind. Now that you've sort of had the experience of America and then seeing Indian entrepreneurs so very closely, how do you see our Desi entrepreneurs really in this very competitive global scenario?
I think at the idea enthusiasm level, very, very high scores. I'm so pleased over the last decade, from 2006 when I moved to India and started doing this, to today. There's just a very vibrant, enthusiastic, committed entrepreneurial ecosystem, and that's been a lot of fun to be part of that journey and inflection. I think we are just growing now in maturity, in knowing what are the give and take of building a large business. It's one thing to be an entrepreneur and a founder. It's another thing to be a CEO of a large company, and the responsibilities that come with that, the obligations that come with that. And that's also a leadership journey, and we are seeing that unfold in front of us right now. And there, I think, in some ways, more mature markets like West probably have more mentors, more of a support ecosystem, more inspiration and stories on what is and how. And I think we are still working through that. We are very young on that still. And lastly, look, it's very important whether we look at it from policies, from the government, to the understanding and commitment from the entrepreneurs and founders. Shareholder returns must matter. And for all the excitement and enthusiasm we have in India for the last decade, focusing on how do we exit, how do we create value, because it's a virtuous cycle. The more value you create, more capital flows in to support that. And this market is a very global financial market, and for global financial players to want to continue to be engaged in India, ensuring that there is a supportive ecosystem, not just from the entrepreneur's perspective, but from a shareholder perspective, is, I think, very critical.
And I'm sure that the move for you personally was also, of course, quite a major step. I would imagine that there must have been a fair number of people who tried to discourage you, especially given that you came back in 2006. What and why did you decide to move?
I think 2006 was a time of a lot of possibilities. It was a moment where how the opportunity in India could unfold, at least from somebody looking from outside in. Wasn't quite clear what that path would unfold like, but the promise was, just too alluring, let's put it that way. And so when I looked at it, the West, I think there is a more mature ecosystem. Here, it's about something grounds up and something that you can actually be a key impact player and influencer. And that was very, very attractive to me. And early stage ecosystem didn't really exist. There was a lot of interest from people who had global work experience and local entrepreneurs. I contrasted that from just new graduates foregoing desire to work in large either consulting firms or investment banking firms or whatever, and wanting to take the step back and be entrepreneurs. So all of that sort of inflection points was very heady for me in 2006. All the more so because there were also a lot of people who said, India is not ready yet. And for me, at least, it felt very ready, and being able to sort of prove that that was right. I mean, there's a certain fulfillment that comes from that itself.
You've been now in India for a decade or so, ma'am. What do you think is the most rewarding part of being in India? And also, in the same breath, what is the most frustrating thing about having to do business here, about sort of doing what you do here?
The rewarding part of being in India has really been watching these young entrepreneurs prove that they are as good as anybody else on a global par, that we can innovate, we can build great businesses out of India, and we have entrepreneurs who can scale. That was always a big question, and we have managers who are willing to, take risk and innovate and build these great businesses. So the journey of the individual entrepreneurs I've been part of, and seeing that unfold, seeing them unfold and rise to their potential, that has been the most rewarding part of the journey for me. The frustrating part of the journey is really that the velocity that I think we should have, could have in India, always seems a bit constrained. It's sort of 2 steps forward, 1 step backward, and I would like and hope to see the next decade have really India sort of be able to fulfill its promise and potential.